Over the years, we've had a lot of people comment their affinity for Android brand stereos and how much better they are than typical international brands like Pioneer, Kenwood, and Sony. So we got one in. Thank you to Desaita for partnering with us on this video. We'll put links in the bio below to check out all of their car stereos. Needless to say, I was anxious to get my hands on this stereo, and to be honest, it's one of my favorites I've ever tested. Not only does this thing have an oversized 10.2-inch capacitive touchscreen, it features a ball joint mount for display mobility, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, wireless and wired Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, built-in navigation, 3 USBs, plus is basically a tablet with an Android 9.0 OS, meaning you can literally download any app you want and browse the internet in your car. Out of the box, the stereo comes with a display guide, thank you card, so cute, GPS antenna, dual USB harness, RCA preamp output harness with front camera and trigger, single USB harness for Apple CarPlay, can also be used for Android Auto, Wi-Fi antenna, external microphone for hands-free calling, user manual, RCA AV input harness with backup camera input, then a very cool feature is 2 optional power harnesses. One features a built-in radio antenna, and the other option features steering wheel control keys. Both operate perfectly with the Metra aftermarket harness. And finally, the 10.2-inch double-din Android stereo. Similar to our recent video on the Power Acoustic PDN 1060HB, this display features a ball joint in the rear, allowing mobility of the display up and down, left and right, and in circular rotation. It operates on the same clip system to release the display from the ball joint. However, this should only be done during installation and is not meant to be a modular unit. Releasing the display gives easy access to the micro SD card slot. The rear connections on the unit include Wi-Fi TV antenna, wiring harness for power ground and speaker, HDMI output, GPS antenna, radio antenna, Bluetooth microphone, plus a whole slew of inputs for all the included and optional harnesses. Initial boot time was pretty average. However, the stereo has an incredibly fast warm boot time of 1 second. This is one of the coolest stereos we've gotten into the studio. It's not perfect, but it's unique and has a ton of awesome features that you and I have been begging the Pioneers, Kenwoods, and Sonys of the world to add to their stereos for years. The not quite HD IPS capacitive touchscreen has a resolution of 1024 by 600, but looks better than any other screen I've seen besides the HD display on the Kenwood DDX9905S. And it plays back 4K files. Obviously it's not displaying them in 4K, but you can play back a 4K video file. That's pretty cool. They did opt for a wider screen than a typical double-din, like many newer vehicles have nowadays up front. Although I've felt more responsive capacitive touchscreens, it still felt great. And the 2.5D water drop display makes for a killer image. Like I said, this thing is like if an Android tablet and a car stereo got together and had a baby. This Max 6 model features the new PX6 processor, Android 9.0 OS, a Rockchip PCU providing 4GB of RAM, 64GB internal storage, and a hexa-core processor. Dasaita isn't afraid to share their hardware specs. This is so refreshing to see. What are the rest of you hiding? The sources look good, plus you can drag and drop the sources into different locations like on a smartphone. To use the Dasaita to its full potential, you need to connect it to a Wi-Fi source. Either use your vehicles if you have Wi-Fi, or simply use your phone as a personal hotspot. The stereo settings control the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth connectivity. Once connected, you can literally do anything you want. Treat it like a tablet or an iPad. Google and Chrome are pre-downloaded. Surf the web for whatever you want. YouTube works wonderfully. Check out QMV's latest video. And get this, you can access the Google Play Store and download whatever you want. I was able to easily download Instagram and start gramming away. Be aware, you'll be using your phone's data for all web and app usage with the hotspot connection. Onto Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Both work with this stereo. Apple CarPlay works either connected to the single USB harness or wirelessly. For wireless, connect to the stereo's Wi-Fi with your iPhone and enter the CarPlay source. The wired connection only requires a connection to the USB. CarPlay worked very fast on this unit and everything looked fantastic on the massive display. Android Auto also works and you can connect to any of the 3 USBs for access. Then enter the Z-Link source and give it a minute to connect. However, Android Auto was noticeably slower than Apple CarPlay on this stereo and got a bit laggy. Dasaita informed us of a firmware update coming out to improve Android Auto performance, so we may update the video in the future and show the differences before the update and after the update once we get it and apply it to the stereo. The Dasaita does not support wireless Android Auto. Mirroring a device is simple. Using the stereo's RCA AV input harness with our Bueller BU HDMI-V, you'll be able to mirror your phone to the stereo. For iPhone, also use a Lightning Digital AV adapter, and USB-C Android devices use the Bueller BUC HDMI 6. Links for all of the adapters below in the video bio. The unit also features built-in navigation, but personally, I'll stick to Google Maps and Apple CarPlay. The unit has 3 USB inputs. The single USB again is made specifically for Apple CarPlay, but can also be used for Android Auto. Android Auto will work on all 3 USBs. All 3 will charge your device no matter what it is. But the dual USBs work best with a USB thumb drive for stored files. For audio, it plays back MP3 and WMA files. Music playback from USB provides album artwork. For video, it plays back MP4, and again can handle 4K video. And also JPEG images. Use the 64 gigabytes of internal storage for the stereo to download apps and save files to the Decita. Bluetooth provides hands-free calling as well as wireless music streaming from your apps and music libraries. Some other cool features include compatibility with TPMS sensors for individual tire pressure and temperature per wheel, glossy metallic finish along the edges, and an ST7708N radio chip for high-performance station pickup, 18 FM and 12 AM presets. For audio, the Decita features a built-in 4x50 watt amplifier chip, plus a 15-band equalizer with presets and a DSP setting, plus other great customizable settings to perfect your sound. But what good would all these features be if it didn't sound any good? Let's test this radio out. Our first test was single channel driven, 40 Hz, EQ set to flat, 4 ohms. The stereo clipped at volume 25. So volume 24, our SMD read 16 watts RMS. We got 8.62 volts on the oscilloscope, and our new HP 8903B audio analyzer read 19.76 watts RMS. Next up, 2 channels driven, 40 Hz, volume 24. 15 watts RMS on the SMD, 8.5 volts on the oscilloscope, and 19.05 watts on the audio analyzer. Next up, 2 channels driven, 1 kilohertz. 13 watts on the SMD, 8.8 volts, and 19.4 watts on the audio analyzer. Single channel driven, 1 kilohertz. 13 watts RMS on the SMD, 8.92 volts, and 20.12 watts on the audio analyzer. Next, we tested the RCA preamp outputs using a flat EQ. 40 Hz, volume 30, we got about 1.8 volts on all equipment. With each frequency on the EQ set to full, we got about 4.5 volts around the board. Then we tested the distortion of the RCAs. At volume 26, we had a distortion of 0.03%. At volume 27, the distortion jumped to 0.74%. Then, at full clip, volume 28, we got 4.5% distortion. We also picked up a solid frequency response. All in all, we were very satisfied with the results of the Decita. Set and customize the color of the touchscreen commands on the left of the display. Font size, brightness, night display, plus change the wallpaper. Swipe down the top of the display for fast access to settings and notifications. There's also a built-in calendar and calculator. The screensaver clock graphic is a nice touch. Despite all of these amazing features, we have to go over some cons. Decita packed a ton of features into this stereo, but I wish the manual was more detailed, not only with information on the specs, but also going through all of the menus and settings, what you can and can't do with the stereo. You kind of just gotta play around with the stereo and figure out where everything is and what all of its functions are. When using Apple CarPlay, your phone mimics the source you're in. If you exit out of a source, for example pressing your home button on your phone, then the stereo exits out of the source and takes you to the home screen of Apple CarPlay. I also would have loved to see an HDMI input instead of an output, but I guess they were thinking about the rear seat passengers more than the front seat. I also had a little difficulty setting the illumination color for the touchscreen commands. I did as instructed, went to car settings, elements, selected a color, but every time I did, the colors would just shut off after a few seconds. Then we discovered you must connect the pink illumination wire on the harness, so don't miss that during installation. Like I said, there's so much going on in the stereo, you gotta spend time playing around with it. Fortunately, the depth of the chassis is shorter than the typical double-din head unit, because once you have all of the included harnesses and cables connected in the back, you're dealing with a lot of cables, and it could get difficult to fit everything in the dash if the chassis was any longer. And finally, no audio playback from smartphones via the USB source outside of CarPlay and Android Auto. Let us know if you'd buy a brand like Decita instead of the usual suspects. Be sure to go to qualitymobilevideo.com to get all of your car audio and video gear with us today. Links for everything in the bio below. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and click that like button, but if you hated it, click the dislike button. Join the conversation below and subscribe to our channel if you're new.